Hollywood, led by filmmaker Lena Elmeligy. This is the first of 3 engagements comprising Being Seen, SWANA Visibility and Perspective in the Arts. The set integrating 2 talks by each of artists Lena Elmeligy and Martin Zabari, and the workshop to follow. Al-Bustan is delighted to lend a forum for SWANA artists to produce discourse relating to how artists of background from Southwest Asia and North Africa move in an America of 2021. I would like to thank our funders and donors without whose support we would not be positioned to bring you such arts programming. These include public and private foundations, funds, and collectives: Asian Mosaic Fund, the Ford Foundation, Independence Foundation, Independence Media Foundation, the Local Initiative Support Corporation, PNC Arts Alive, the Samuel F. Fells Fund, the Southeast Asian Mutual Assistance Association Coalition, the Stockton Rush Bartle Foundation, and of course the William Penn Foundation, as well as federal, state, and local government entities, the Philadelphia Council on the Arts, the Philadelphia Cultural Fund, and the U.S. Small Business Administration. I would be remiss not to thank all of our individual donors whose support has long sustained Al-Bustan with care and commitment, including possibly audience members graciously joining us tonight. We welcome your donations. We also welcome you to our space. Our virtual space is your virtual space. I now pass on the MC duties to my trusted and exceptional colleague, David Hain Menendez, to introduce our esteemed guest, Lena Elmeligy, and to moderate the discussion with Lena. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Mohammed.
You, David.
Hello, everyone. Thank you again for being here tonight. We are very happy to be bringing Lena back after being featured in our gallery exhibit, our last gallery exhibit, which featured SWANA artists from particularly the Chicago area and the Philadelphia, New York area. I will remove the spotlight for behind it. There you go. I am so happy to have her here, Lena here in particular, to talk about this topic, because we cherish so much the work of artists who are actually living and working in the field in an active way that allows them to navigate that space and speak authentically to who they are. To tell you a little bit more about Lena in particular, she is a writer and director with a focus on Chicago production and experience in journalism. She graduated from Northwestern with a major in RTVF and minor in Middle East and North African studies. Since then, she's been working on independent and commercial film and television productions in Chicago, writing and supporting creative projects by independent filmmakers in Chicago as well. She is also in leadership with Mezcla Media Collective, where she develops programming and helps build a network of Chicago-based women and non-binary filmmakers of color. Her mission as a filmmaker is to infuse the process of production with the same values and ideals as she does in her writing. By elevating people into positions where they tell their own story, have autonomy over the means of their productions, and are adequately compensated for their labor and talent. She is currently the writer and director of Gharib miniseries, the head organizer of Mezcla's new mentorship program, alumni coordinator for Northwestern's prison education program, and the main facilitator for a sponsored partnership between Mezcla and Northwestern. I do not want to take up more space tonight than is ultimately necessary, and I am so happy to have Lena to lead us in this conversation and give us her experience and her perspective on decoloniality in SWANA filmmaking. I would highlight also that this is the first of 3 events that we're having in October in particular. The next will be next week, and then the last will be the week after, featuring another speaker who's on with us tonight, Martin Zebari. And then the two will combine for a final workshop where we are in particular hoping that writers, both stage and screen, can come together to work with these two amazing artists to have a space for SWANA artists and others to talk about their perspectives and work through a workshop, actually develop something in the time together. Without any further ado, Lena Elmeligy.
Hello. So I'm Lena, as has been established. And I'm really glad that this is being recorded because, as we can see, there are ways that this can be repurposed in the future. I think that in general, we can get comfortable. This space can be whatever the people person who are here want it to be. If that means you want to leave your camera off and just listen, I can go on about this for a long time. If you would like to turn your camera on, participate, either now or at the end, we can do that. Again, like I am happy to talk about this in whatever capacity, but I want to first and foremost open this conversation by saying that I, for a long time, had, as many MENA, SWANA marginalized creators have, a period of intense imposter syndrome that kept me from being like, I am not an artist, I'm not a filmmaker, I'm not a writer. And so to be leading this discussion now is really gnarly, because I happen to find a group of people and a group of creatives like Martin, like David, organizations like El Bustan that support art and creative missions in exactly the vein that I felt called to pursue them. And so I'm really glad that I get to be in a conversation with, I think something's ringing somewhere, in a conversation that is interesting to anyone, and that where like I can actually, share this passion and this interest of a decolonial framework for film. Okay, so to start off, this is Martin Zebari. I want to introduce him because I will ask him to partake in some of this conversation in just a bit, but I'm going to start. Okay, you're pinned now. But I'm going to start by telling everyone a little bit about my journey, kind of how I started in film. So I graduated with a bachelor's in radio, television, and film. And by the time I graduated, I was pretty much in a place where I was like, all right, film is not for me. I'm probably just going to figure out what else to do. I felt like I had difficulty finding a place where my stories fit into the school, the major, the education that I was a part of, the educational setting that I was a part of. I'm from LA, born and raised, and from what I knew of the film industry in LA, I was pretty much like, yeah, I'm not gonna like fit into that. I don't really know what's interesting on a mainstream level to people. And those aren't the stories I'm gonna tell or care to tell, or even could if I wanted to. So I'm just gonna like find another profession. I ended up graduating, staying in Chicago. And a lot of the reason that I stayed in Chicago was because of a project that my professor, now mentor, was created as a research project and is now an actual full-fledged organization with like a MacArthur grant called Open Television. And I was so intrigued by Open Television that I was like, I'm just gonna stay, I'm gonna learn more about this organization and kind of see what's up. I'm gonna like I like the artists. I thought that as small as the organization was, I was very enamored by it, and I was like, I'm just gonna like stay in this space and learn about it. And I was a PA. I served in a lot of different roles and positions on sets because I was like, I just want to be in the space. I don't feel ready yet to actually do anything myself, to direct, to write, anything like that. So I did that for a couple of years. I worked a lot of different jobs to make money, and I started to form my politics around filmmaking by being in that space, because number one, not only were the stories of QT, BI, POC centered, but so were the actual skill sets and actual crew, and from start to finish, you know, in pre-production, the producers reflected the people that the stories were about. All of the crew members were like, I was rarely on crews that were white male dominated, and when I was, there was like usually somebody else in charge that was calling the shots, that and had an identity where their narrative was at stake in the story that was being told, right? So like if we're telling a story about women, there was a woman in charge. If we're telling a story about you know, an intersectional identity of like being a queer trans person of color, like somebody was in that room who was contributing to the story. And I guess being in that space for a while, I started to form my politics around like, okay, this is what it looks like to have an equitable space in film. Like, this is what it feels like to collaborate horizontally with people, to have a structure in which people are not creating artificial hierarchies just to be in charge. This is what it generally feels like to learn as you go, where nobody is claiming to be you know, the absolute holder of knowledge, the person who knows everything. And that's why I felt like it was so important for me to come in here and be like, by the way, I'm sharing completely my perspective and my own personal experience as someone who is who I am, and not just the holder of knowledge or the person, you know, writing the script for the first time, theoretically and literally. And I guess I was in that space enough. And another thing that I want to say about that is that by being in that space, I realized you don't need to have a network with millions of dollars behind you in order to make something happen. And not just in the sense of like, oh, let's get scrappy, let's like, you know, do an Instagram live, let's like create something on YouTube with like our phones, which like absolutely people do, and people have created feature films on their iPhones and they won awards and they're incredible. But you can actually form relationships with community organizations, with organizations that are around you, people in whatever industry you're working in, that want to create ecosystems and economies where artists support each other and barter skills, and actually create something at an industry standard that is good and quality and gives you the experience of making a film. My experience with living in LA is that I felt that unless I got picked up by a network, there was no way I was ever going to be able to see something that was my idea play out in front of me. And I think being in this space enough, being in the space of indie filmmaking with people whose values I shared, taught me that it is possible, that I can actually tap into resources that are available and accessible to me and make something happen. So that brings me to the Hoodie miniseries, which is now in post-production. It should be done mid-November. And that is a story about a multi-generational, first-generation immigrant household of women who are navigating tradition, assimilation, and belonging and transformation in the US, all living in the same household. This was an idea that had started when I was in college, and eventually, yeah, Tangerine. That is exactly what I was thinking about. Thank you, Mohammed. Yeah, so I was writing iterations of this story when I was in college. And by that, I mean, I had like characters who kept transferring into different storylines, whatever. And again, I didn't put much stock in them. And eventually, I, over the course of like a couple years, because I never really took it seriously enough to be like, I have to commit to writing this and give myself a timeline, right? Over the course of a couple years, and I had made one thing in college, by the way. And I did that because I was like, this is the only time I'm going to have access to a high quality camera. I better make something now or it's never going to happen. So I made something in college. After that, I was kind of chipping away at the script for a couple of years. And then I applied for a DCASE grant. DCASE is a City of Chicago artist grant. They have like a number that they give out every year to different artists. I was awarded that grant. And that meant that I had to produce a product by, at the time it was the end of 2020, but yeah, the DCASE grant. It's actually spelled DCASE. Oh, shoots. Yeah, that's a grant. So I, the pandemic happened. So obviously that timeline has shifted, but it was like, okay, I have to get something done. So I, at that point, had one person who I had developed a close relationship with by just working on film sets with them. And I was close enough with them that I felt like I could actually start building and forming and fleshing out this idea. And when, and so I would just talk to them about it. And I'm not going to like say every bit of this process, but I do want to emphasize that you do not, one part of what I believe is a decolonial framework for filmmaking is that who you seek approval from, who your audience is, and who you're trying to appeal to. And if from day one, your goal is to make things that speak to yourself and speak to your community, your process is going to be transformed just by that intention. By having the set goal of being like, whose input am I allowing to shape this narrative? That is huge. And I feel like if you're writing a script and you're saying like, how do I get a studio to pick this up? That is in my opinion, when I imagine doing that, I think like that is a very nebulous direction to take. Who is that for? You know, like who is a network catering to? What is the network's incentive and goal? It's to bring in as many subscribers, as many viewers as possible. So if you align yourself with that mission, you're not necessarily telling like your story. And that, but again, not prescriptive. This is my belief and what I told myself. But so I bring that up to say, I made the intention to be like, I'm going to be really careful who I talk to about this idea. And I now want to say that from this point forward, Martin might have something that is worth sharing, because Martin and I have had conversations where we've discussed the way that identity plays a role in casting and bringing together a team. But I'm not yet throwing you on the stage. I'm just saying whenever you want to unmute yourself and hop in, feel free. But yeah, so from that point forward, because I had this deadline, that's how I started to build my team. This is something that I have said before when I've spoken to people who are currently undergraduates, and I think it's applicable for everyone. A lot of what people will tell you when you want to go into film is, and this is like a token phrase, is start in the mailroom. I understand that there's like validity in working your way up in any industry, starting as a PA, building relationships, earning credibility. That's all very real. When people tell you to start in the mailroom, my advice, whenever I talk to anyone, or what the advice that I follow for myself, is like to ask that person if that's what they did. A lot of the times people have various connections, and like in film in particular, it's like who you know. I mean, I guess in any industry it's kind of like that, but in film it's like, well, who you know is where you end up going. That is so true. And it is also true when you are building outside of mainstream Hollywood. It is so true that you can build a network that is rewarding and gives back to you outside of that general trajectory. And there are some norms of, and I do want to reiterate that this is such a vast subject that I would love for anyone who has a question, has something specific that they want to talk about or that is on their mind, to like insert that, because this is a very multifaceted conversation and we could get at it from any angle. But yeah, I've spoken to Martin about this, but in general, when starting a production, building a team, one of the things that I tried to keep central was staying authentic to that mission and that audience. And I guess I want to pause real fast because I'm about to venture into like actual production. And I just want to see if anyone has anything that they would like to talk about, ask about, before I move on to this like other actually making a film portion.
I don't have a question,
Mm-hmm.
but hello everyone, my name is Martin. I am an actor and a playwright, and Lena and I came into contact through this gallery at El Bustan, and mostly we found our life kind of in the same place as a playwright and screenwriter. Lena had kind of ventured on her first big project, this giant behemoth of a project, and I recently wrote my first play, and so I've been in kind of that world and trying to like get that out there. And I find so much of what Lena's saying relatable to the theater industry. And it's so easy for a lot of young writers often ask me like, what can I do to do, you know, to be able to do, you know, like what you're doing, or how do I have my play read, or how do I have my play produced? And something that I'm relating to that Lena's talking about is this, like, there is no guidebook for us. Like usually the guidebook doesn't include us. And so we kind of are left to forge our own way through the industry, which makes events like these so much more important, because it really is all about who you know. Like, you know, I wish that there was some magical potion that I can give young new writers that's like, here, have your play produced. But really, like, I wouldn't be in the position that I am in now if I didn't work with this theater that's producing my play for upwards of 6 years as an actor. And so it was only through my relationship with them that they, you know, that I believe they were, you know, considering my script. And so I just wanted to reiterate that kind of like community is like where you find your kind of niche, no matter what industry you're in the arts. And it really does kind of heighten everything when you have people who support you and like to work with you and want to do anything they can to help you grow. So I just wanted to reiterate that, Lena, because that sounded really similar to like, you know, where I am right now, just, you know, with a different medium of storytelling.
So before we move into the production side of it, kind of going off of that, a question that we had beforehand was whether growing up, like, what was your experience then regarding representation in films for BIPOC and SWANA and LGBTQ and other marginalized peoples in film? And did you ever actually feel represented in film growing up? And if so, what is that example? What was that thing that you saw yourself in, and that like maybe felt like I can do that, or I can do better than that, or like this isn't bad, but like, I want to be part of this.
I mean, growing up, my standards for representation were pretty low. Like I was like, if I saw someone, like I remember watching Mindy Kaling, and like when Mindy Kaling came out with the Mindy Kaling Project, I'm Egyptian, I'm like not South Asian. and I felt represented by that for a while, because I was like, oh, there's like literally anyone who even is near me on like physically, aesthetically, at all close. I mean, we don't even look alike, you know, like, so I mean, I think that my standards have shifted over time, but I also believe that number one, like, media is a pillar of the government. Maybe not movies, maybe not television, like fiction narrative, but media representation, what we see put in front of us, is a huge, huge force of power in how we understand ourselves collectively and individually. And we are like, when we're not given a sort of, I don't even want to say model, but any kind of self-reflexive lens for us to like look back on, understand ourselves, reflect on ourselves and our place in society, there's this way of evolution that we're like missing out on. And I think that as like a child of immigrants, for example, you are forging in identity that is not only different from like your peers, but different from your parents. Your parents have never questioned where they came from. You're like, I'm at least talking about my experience. Obviously, this is not true for everyone, but like with my parents, they know who they are. They know they're Egyptian. They know they were raised Muslim. They came here and kind of like everything around them was foreign to them, but like who they are internally was intact. Whereas like me growing up, it was like, am I this? Am I that? Like, where am I in the spectrum of like, everything that I'm learning is held on equal territory, and within that there's so many contradictions. And I think that that's what I feel driven. Those are the stories that I feel driven to tell, are the ones that like make sense of conflicting ideas and like at least articulate what I know of what it looks like to come into yourself from that perspective. Everybody else gets theirs told, and like I'm not really interested in I guess being understood or seen by everyone. I'm interested in telling stories that resonate with people who are like me. Like I imagine speaking to myself, like you said, David, like growing up, I was very influenced by media. I used to like consume things and model myself after it and be like, this is my example of who I want to be, how I want to dress. That was my proximity to culture, you know, as it is for a lot of us. And now we have social media, we have so many different like avenues through which we can find that influence and tap into. But still, when it comes to like longer form stories, I'm interested in speaking to people who are on that journey, and not in this like conclusive here's what it's like to be me with a bow on it, but in this way of like, you are not alone in navigating this. Here are some of the questions, and like we share a lot of them, and we have a lot in common when we're like on this journey together, and like here's how we can ask these questions together. And the thing is that I was inspired by things that had nothing to do with film. Like even growing up, not growing up, in college, I rarely spent time like within my major. I was interested in so many other things that I think fed me as a creative. And one of those things is watching people in my generation forge communities from like across different cultures and heritages, but in sharing like what it means to be first generation, or like in sharing what it means to be like of this other group of people who are like finding family in their outside of their bloodlines, or interested in connecting back to a culture that maybe they didn't have access to growing up, or they weren't able to learn from their parents. Like my dad didn't teach me Arabic because he wanted me to speak English, and like that, and because he didn't want me to go to school as like a baby speaking Arabic and then be othered, you know. And so now it's like this whole thing with like me getting older and being like, I want to go to Egypt, I want to learn Egyptian Arabic. And I think that that generation of voices is like very robust and very much alive, and there should be something for us. And that's why I tell stories. And I think that that was rooted in an evolution that is like very personal and holistic, and not necessarily about being a filmmaker, but having a story that you think is important to tell. And I think that that is a huge way that you work outside of industry norms. That's a huge way that you change the way that processes are in production and in post-production, is by putting your, not having representation means you might miss a certain type of personal evolution. Yeah, I totally agree with you, Lucetto. Hi. Yeah, I think that being motivated by that growth for yourself and like in community with others, to me, like that's the bottom line that I see in a lot of independent filmmaking and a lot of filmmaking that happens outside of like standard industry culture. Is it's not about being like, how do we sell the most tickets, how do we make the most money? And I think that like it is very hard. The reality is that like creating a film that is rooted completely in principle and like values is way harder to fund, like way harder materially to do, because you have to apply for grants, and grants are a lot of work, and you have to fundraise, and fundraising sucks, and you have to like, you know, go through all of these alternative routes to materialize your vision. And sometimes it's exhausting, and sometimes it's like, wow, you know, like not only is this something that I sometimes feel like I'm doing alone, and that's why, again, like Martin said, community is so important. It's so important that you're co-creating with people who see what you see. But also I have to work 10 times harder to like, you know, make it happen and like rally people around it. And like for every dime that I earn and cent that I earn, and meanwhile, like these stories, like people come in with pitches that are completely not fleshed out and like sometimes get like millions of dollars, you know, and like that is the struggle. And I don't want to like pretend that that's not there, because it is there. That is why we need each other. That is why you don't go through this process by yourself. That is why organizations like Al Bustan exist, because they say, we're here not for every single identity group. We're here not to be, you know, this like catch-all organization that is like doing everything. We're here to pour into these people, and we support other organizations that are there to pour into those people, and we all need each other. But at the end of the day, like I didn't find communities of people that were like your voice. I want to nurture that. I want to invest in that. That didn't happen when I was in college. When I was in college, I would be sharing stories and pitching ideas that teachers would be like, that's really cute. You're going to give actors who don't get jobs like some good opportunities. Or that's really cute. It would be a good indie series. Like I had one cohort that I was a part of that I dropped out of like almost right before finals. Like I had gotten so far, and I would go home crying every day because of how demoralizing it felt to be like, wow, you're like, I don't feel taken seriously as a writer at all. And I don't feel like I'm able to like grow in this environment. And I really want to, and I'm really trying to. And eventually, and then that was like an academic context that, right, like supposedly on paper is supposed to have all of the resources, all of the knowledge as to like how to make you grow. They looked at all the data of like, this is how artists are formed, this is what you need. And it didn't work. And then I graduated, and then I found people who were like, I know what you need to grow. I know what I need to foster in you as a creative, because I know what I need and fostered in me. And that's why I found organizations like Al Bustan. That's also why I found organizations like Open Television and Mezcla Media Collective, another organization in Chicago that I work with, and artists like Martin and, you know, individual people who have believed in me creatively and like encouraged me to grow in that path. David, your decision.
In 2021, then, are there any SWANA characters, artists, whether in film or otherwise, that you find particularly inspiring, or even a film that has a SWANA story or a SWANA actor, a SWANA director, anything that you could point to that you find is embodying that kind of thing that you wish you had growing up? I mean, other than Martin Zavari, obviously.
Yeah.
somebody else that you can point to.
I think it's an amalgamation of characters and stories. Like Rami exists, and that is on Hulu. That is made by, I think it's like FX. I can't remember the network, but it is made by a network. And there are stories like We Are Lady Parts is about Muslim, I presumably SWANA, but I don't know. It's the problematic assumption, but maybe some of them are. And that's about like Muslim characters. And there are, yeah, I mean, there are definitely people who are of Arab descent. There are really good Palestinian made films that I really enjoy watching. And like, I've certainly, not only is it that more of those stories are being made, but I also know where to look for them. And Virginia, you asked, what do you hope to see in the future of film / media? So hi Virginia, how are you? So in the future of film and media, one, it's Hulu, but I don't know. I think maybe, I guess it might be Hulu original. Yeah, true. So in the future of film and media, well, I'll answer it, but I also am curious what you see. But in the future of film and media, I think that I want to see a lot behind the scenes change. I want to see a lot change about how the economy works, how money moves, who gets money and why, and who is distributing it, what executives are looking for content. I think that the process of development needs to look different. And I think it's starting to, even in LA. You know, I was like I said, I'm from LA and didn't go back, but I do know that work is being done by certain production companies that are like large, and there is one, but of course I'm not going to remember it right now. But yeah, I would hope to see that people who are recruiting and developing stories, people who are in that room, I would like to see that change. And then I would like to see generally the economy around funding change, because Hollywood notoriously just has so much money and then like does not know what to do with it. And they like, you hear people say like, well, there just aren't enough, you know, Black actors, and that's why no one got awards at the Emmys. And it's like, that's not true, you know. And like, clearly they're not looking in the right places. So it's like, whoever is out there looking for stories and developing them, like, that needs to change from the start. And from there, I think a lot of things will change. But I think that that's why it's not just about representation. It's about it's deeper than that, and it's like more systemic than that. And for future generations who will watch your films, and for future directors, actors, screenwriters, so future generations, I hope that it is a foundation or springboard for them to go even further than I went. I hope that it's just like, wow, here's that story. You know what that makes me think of? This other really funny story, or this other aspect of existence that I think about sometimes. I'm gonna go tell that story. And just to build out the like available narratives, the library of content that exists that people can pull from and like tap into, to be like, I'm going to watch all of these things so that I don't have to come out of a vessel as an artist, like trying to think about what a fully fleshed story from this perspective looks like. Like I have all of this material to pull from and all of these ways that I've grown without like, you know, being at the mic to do it, because I think that's really stressful. Like I'm like, dang, one day someone's going to look back at what I made and be like, whoa, that's really embarrassing and cringy to watch. Maybe it'll even be in 2021, but it's like, I had to do it. I had to do it because like it just had to be done. And like that's really scary. So I hope that it's easier for future generations, for future directors, actors, writers. I think that I would like to see the path to becoming a director, actor, and screenwriter be a little more interesting than it is now. I feel like there are these exceptional outliers who are like, this is this really alternative standout way that they ended up in their position, and like look where they came from and look at where they are now. I wish that those narratives and those experiences weren't so far out. I wish that there were just more paths, more avenues into those kinds of positions so that we can see not the same 5 directors circulating and making everything, so that we can see people with, yeah, and without a mentality of scarcity, that there's abundant opportunity, that there's enough for everyone, and that there are many people who can tell this story. Again, I think that one of my critiques about mainstream Hollywood industry practices is that we get stuck on, these are the people who can do it. We know this Black director can tell the Black story, so we are only going to call them because they're not going to mess it up. No, there are so many talented, wonderful people with like intersectional backgrounds and experiences who have had experiences outside of being a director to be able to tell more interesting stories. And I think that we're not going to get people with these like dynamic, intersectional, interesting backgrounds with like texture and like that are complex and compelling if they don't come from different places and experiences and aren't rooted in in different foundations. So that would be my hope. If you don't mind sharing, and you totally don't have to, you can just put your hand up if you want to pass. What is your vision?
Oh, also thank you for your answer. That was beautiful. Like I have no information in this world at all because I went into graphic design, but I definitely feel you. You mentioned imposter syndrome. You mentioned artificial hierarchy. I'm sure there's gatekeeping, mansplaining, people telling you what you're supposed to experience. So yeah, like being able to change that by taking back that power. So being able to fight those social barriers, like, yes, I've seen this in a lot of industries where people of color, minorities, people who are multicultural, they are stuck at the bottom. Like, yeah, we got them in, but they don't promote, they don't put them in positions of power. So they're always stuck at the bottom, like glass ceilings, other types of ceilings. So being able to fight that, I'm sure it's such a hard struggle being the very first to break it, but it sounds like you're on your way there. So hopefully soon it'll change. Yeah,
thank you for sharing, Virginia. And I mean, I think I'm definitely not the first, you know, like there are definitely people who have done it. I just don't think that I think we just are all finding each other. We're all like searching for each other so that we can like be collectively more of a force. And as a graphic designer, I'm sure you experience that plenty in your industry. I'm sure it's like all of these issues kind of exist across most, if not all, industries. Martin, you said so that we don't have to climb to each other. And thank you for your question, Virginia. That was really thoughtful. And it's good to see you. Martin, what was your thought about this? So that we don't have to climb to each other to get to the top.
Oh, it was just when you were talking about scarcity mentality. And, I think so often we in this country have assimilated to being the token of ourselves. And so when someone else tries to take that token, it's like you've worked your whole life to be a token, and someone else just comes and takes it from you, and you're no longer the like Assyrian Iraqi person because you're surrounded by a community, which is like the end goal, right? I don't want to be the only one of me, but it's hard to kind of relinquish that patriarchy and racism and just all of those things off of you to be able to like really take in what's around you and like, oh, there are other SWANA people, I should work with them and we should all work together to get to the top, as opposed to climbing each other and like needing to be the one or needing to be the voice or so that's just what I was just kind of speaking out loud on text while you were speaking.
Do you have thoughts about, was there anything that you wanted to, I know you have to go in a few minutes because you have rehearsal, but were there any thoughts that you wanted to share on kind of like production, casting, anything at all?
Well, I don't have any on-camera experience, so I don't know, you know,
I mean,
what's necessarily relevant, but for I implore everyone who wants to get anything going, whether that's a play, a screenplay, a poem, you know, a book, whatever it is, that if there is something that is that you want finished and it's just not getting done, first of all, take me and Lena's example that like it took me like 5 years to write my play, and then same for Lena, like she's been thinking about it since college, and sometimes that's the journey. And I really like, I implore is like too harsh of a word, but I motivate, challenge, not even challenge, just encourage, thank you. the best money I have ever spent on my entire career was a new playwriting workshop where I got to finish my first play. And you know, I truly believe that without that workshop, I would not have been able to finish that play, and I would still kind of be in this like, oh, am I good enough? Do I have interesting things to say? Do I need to finish this? Does anyone need to hear me? It's like all these thoughts that are constantly in our heads. Like, reward yourself with the opportunity of getting to work on something for yourself and like finish it. And then like, it's always easier to take that rough draft of something and turn it into something better rather than thinking about it. And I say that as someone who, you know, had a play in my head for 5 years before I put it down on a piece of paper. So I guess that's my big takeaway. If I'm going to give anything, it's like, and if you don't want to pay for one, start one with your friends. I have like 4 or 5 informal kind of writing groups that I, you know, every once in a while we'll just meet up with some friends and we'll discuss our writing, and it just gives us a deadline and it gives us like a place to talk comfortably and safely about our work without fear of judgment. So yeah, and I really appreciate your perspective, Lena, on how you've been doing this in this industry, because the Hollywood is a whole nother game. I mean, I thought the theater industry was pretty, you know, homogenous, but Hollywood is a whole nother thing. So I commend you on your work and trying to navigate that.
And yours.
Thank you for having me. I have to run. Thank you.
Have a good rehearsal.
Thank you. It's good to meet you all.
So Lena, the one thing I wanted to lift up that I really like, that I think a lot of people on the outside are not cognizant of, is you said it's not just a matter of having like the black or brown or SWANA character. It's not purely representation. Clearly that matters. Like being able to see yourself on screen, being able to consume media where people, even in any way, are like you, matters. But I think what you pushed earlier, and I think people miss, is it's all of the behind the scene production. It's all of the writers. It's all of the, as Virginia said, the people that are hiring the writers and the production assistants and stuff like that. Like, it has to be top to bottom decoloniality. Otherwise, there is a kind of unseen rot within the system, and it can be covered up by casting a single or a whole cast of people of color, or even writing a story, like, you know, having an actual movie about them. But it's not the same thing, is what I'm trying to say. And I think that's what I was taking away from what you were saying quite a lot. That well, question I was going to ask you would be, like, what do you think the film industry is actually missing in these terms? But I think you nailed it when you said, like, it's more than representation. You know, more than just having people on screen.
Yeah, I mean, I think that also the word representation has gotten so distorted. Like, I feel like the meaning itself has, like, you can say representation and then think, oh, that means what I'm seeing with my eyeballs, you know, when representation is visual. Representation is what shows up on screen. Or you can say representation and mean, I want to be represented in this. What does that mean to you? Does it mean like having people in the room when these decisions, like these pivotal decisions, are being made? Like, I think that there can be depth in representation, just the same way that there can be depth in dialogue. Like, I've heard a lot of people say, it's not enough to just be having conversations. Your work shouldn't just aim to spark dialogue, aim higher. And in my mind, I've like really grappled with that. And I've been like, well, that is my intention with a lot of stuff, is to just get people to start talking about it and thinking about it. But I think that it's when it stops at conversation that's a problem. It's when it's like, we're going to sit in a room, we're going to talk about it, and then we're going to leave that room, live our lives the exact same way, do everything we normally do, buy from all the same places, live, like, not be uncritical generally in our day-to-day lives, except in these conversations. Well, then yeah, those conversations are not enough. But if those conversations are sparking ideas and actions, and you know, those ideas are parlaying to some sort of like actual transformation, that's incredible. That's what we have. You know, words are what we have to communicate. Ideas are what we have to share. Ideas are like the soil that you plant seeds in, are the seeds themselves, you know? So it's like, I think that it's just about the way that these words have been used and understood over time. That's what makes them feel shallow and played out. But in truth, you know, we can ask more when we say representation. We can mean something deeper. And when we say discussion, dialogue, conversation, we can mean more than just words that are, you know, out here to be heard in through one ear out the other. We can actually mean transformative conversations. We can mean depth of representation. And I think that, like, it's sad when words become played out in a way where like you can no longer use them because you feel like, oh, this isn't actually saying what I want it to say. It doesn't mean what I want it to mean anymore. And that's when it becomes your task to be like, I'll show people what I mean when I say representation. I will show people what I mean when I say I want it to spark dialogue. Because those things are and can be meaningful, and they are the sites of change, but not when, you know, our ask is so short term and so immediate and so about like just what is directly in front of us and what we're seeing, and not what is happening outside of that. And I think we just need to consistently interrogate and be critical of what is being shown to us, and where things are coming from. When you watch a movie, simply ask who made this. When you watch a movie about something, look up who the director is, look up who wrote it, ask if they have any stake in this story being told, and if so, what it is. That's a really good place to start, to kind of challenge the industry to do better and expect more from what we're consuming.
So maybe segueing
Yeah.
in that also, like how this may be two parts. How do you think writers or creatives in general can get better when it comes to writing about more diverse, authentic characters? And then also, do you have a plan in yourself to continue to tell these types of stories that include people in your work? Like, what do you see as the next step for you, is maybe the second part of that question.
Yeah, and I know that we're reaching on an hour, so if folks have to go, no worries. But I would say, for me, it's just, again, about like who I'm collaborating with. That's what I intend to do. And I think that what I do is what I would encourage everyone else to do, is just to be like, if you want to tell authentic stories, and if you want to, like, if you want to make stories that have impact, I guess it would be a matter of like thinking about the impact that you want to make, and then tracking where that begins. Like, okay, I want to make this impact. So how do I go to that community, figure out what it is that they need and they want, and not, it doesn't have to just be you. Like I'm sure I'm Egyptian American, but like I have many aspects of my existence that are different than other Egyptian Americans. And so I'm not the last person who I consulted. I definitely like, I'm not going to attempt to represent everyone in this story, but I at least want to make sure that what I do is at the very least not create harmful to my community, and at best is actually like advancing the conversation in a way that is fruitful and helpful to people and is what they want to see. Ask people, what stereotypes are you tired of? What do you not want to see reproduced on screen anymore? What do you want to see? What demonstrations of characters and being and styles do you wish we had more of? And then try and make that, yeah, it doesn't have to be you in your room. You don't have to be the auteur. I had to really like get past that one. Like I said, I was like, had imposter syndrome for a long time, and I was like, well, if I can't sit in my room and do every aspect of this film by myself, am I really a filmmaker? And the answer is like, nobody is going to do everything by themselves. Everybody needs to employ other skill sets. Everybody needs to like to have some aspect of collective. And if you do, like, that doesn't mean it's better or that you're better at it, So I think it's just about like being in conversation, asking questions, not acting like you know everything about the story that you're going to tell, and understanding that other perspectives and people have things to offer, and then like valuing that,
So
yeah, I know we're like way over.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I had maybe two very quick questions. The one, and I was thinking about this earlier when you're talking to Virginia and when you're responding to something else, that I think that it'd be great if, especially your early work, like imagine somebody growing up 10 years from now, he's like, oh yeah, did you see that Lena film? Like, it's like some sort of like trading deck almost that like inspires young artists and creatives that like, it doesn't have to be like, I think to your point earlier, like it doesn't have to be the thing that makes the most money or is seen by the most people. Impact is not measured in those ways. And I think that is something that you've hit on multiple times about the decentering of money and the industry is part of the decoloniality of the perspective in the first place. And that if it has that impact on the lives of people like yourself and others, then that was successful. So I think to go along that is like, how do you hope your film does affect people? How do you hope this film specifically? And then the second part would be, where can we find more information about your work and the project that you're currently working on?
Thank you. Yeah, I would have not thought to talk about that, so I appreciated it. I would say I hope that this particular project, I think that making this was something that personally has been very rewarding, but on a professional level, and I'm just going to be like very candid, on a professional level, the idea behind making this was like, this doesn't have to be perfect, but if I show someone that I had this idea and that I executed it, maybe then it will motivate people to invest in, if not this story, stories like it. And I think that like, it's always good to have a library if you can, but it's also good to just like commit to doing one thing as best you can, and then trying to bring that to people. Like I feel like I have, you know, industry connections who I may not align with, but who I can go to and say, can you invest in this idea? And maybe they would say yes. And I think that the hardest part of this in general was that I didn't have the resources to, you know, pay people as much as I wanted to, and to be like, hey, thank you for working on this project. You're so valuable, so talented, and I'm so grateful for it. And like, I know that you're doing this because you care, because this isn't necessarily what you would be making on your average project. You're doing this on this project, and like, I'm fundraising to make sure that you get paid. But I would like, but one of the things that people said to me, who like artists who I really respect, was like, I will do it, but I want to know that you are going to do something with it when it's done. I want to know that you're going to put it places. I don't want this to die on Vimeo on like a private link. I want it to be shared and seen. And my promise to them was like, if this does turn into anything, into future opportunities, I will like remember you and include you and call you again, and hopefully for like better, higher paying opportunities, and same with myself. And so I think it's more about opening doors from my location than doing anything like too far away. You know, like, sure, if somebody in New York or like, you know, Indiana sees this and they are impacted and moved by it, like, that's great. But where my head is at is more about like what immediately this impact is having in my physical community, because I drew from so many areas of my community, so many organizations in Chicago that gave to me in order to make this. And so my number one thing is like, how do I give back to them? And how do I make it so that the people who made this, like, so that we can just grow like a few inches further out from this location that we started in, as opposed to, you know, trying to launch into like, you know, yeah, so really thinking about my physical community and centering that in the outcome. Where can you find more about it? We have an Instagram. It's called @Ghareeb Miniseries, GHAREEB _mini_series. We have a we are being promoted on Open Television. That's going to be our distribution platform. So they have an app where it's you can stream it where you normally stream like Netflix and YouTube and stuff. So you can get it on your Roku, on your phone. It's called Open Television. Yeah, that's right. And oh, it's actually @Ghareeb. Yeah, and that's Open Television. And yeah, we have our like links in our Instagram bio, and so that goes to our like fundraising platform. If you're in Chicago, you can get tickets. If not, you can like share it with people to learn more about it. And then yeah, you can keep an eye out for it on Open Television. We're hoping to like run a festival circuit before we distribute it publicly. And then once we do that, it'll be there to live, and it will be live streamed, inshallah, November 17th. So
well,
yes.
We hope to have you back in Philadelphia to screen it at some point for us.
Absolutely. So. Yeah, definitely. I look forward to it. Thank you so much for coming. I love this. And thank you, Al-Bustan, Muhammad, and David for having me. I love this organization, and I love that you always are able to curate, you know, like intimate, sincere settings that where meaningful conversations can happen. Talk about deep, not wide. Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Lena, for giving us your time and for obviously having this relationship with Al-Bustan. We really do appreciate having people like you that we can work with, and I look forward to seeing Ghareeb in the near future myself. I'm sure my wife and I will stream it at some point.
Yes.
And otherwise, as I said, please make sure that the others that are on this call or on this Zoom or will be seeing it later, to remember that on Thursday, October 13th at 7:30, we will have our next event titled Queer Spaces, a panel discussion on queer SWANA visibility in the arts, which will be moderated by Martin Yusuf Zavari, who you saw earlier. And then on October 16th is the workshop at 4 p.m., which will be titled Stories Retold, Writing the Stage for Stage and Camera, which both Lena and Martin will lead. And I'm sure that that will be fantastic. So if you know of any aspiring writers who would like to be in there, or even Virginia, if you want to come and try your hand at writing, you know, I think there's not as big of a difference between graphics and writing as you could expect, I think, sometimes. But yeah, I again, I'm very appreciative of your perspective and for coming and joining us tonight. So thank you all. God bless, and we hope to see you at the next event.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Have a good night, everyone.